Good afternoon. My name is Jason Killeen, and I'm an Assistant Executive Director with the Department of Cannabis Regulation. Thank you for joining today's Q&A session. We'll go ahead and get started.
Okay, so thanks, Jason. Our first question is from Charles D. What is the total cost of a cultivation license and the total cost of a distribution license for social equity applicants?
So the department's fee schedule can be found under Municipal Code Section 10419. The pre-application review fee is $597. The temporary approval application fee is $69.69 per activity for social equity applications. The environmental review fee starts at $2,596, but may be significantly higher based on an individual project and whether or not it qualifies for a categorical exemption. And the annual application fee is $7,691 per activity. So assuming somebody applies for 2 activities, their project qualifies for a categorical exemption, and they don't need to resubmit documents or have their property re-inspected, it would cost at least $30,000 to receive 2 annual licenses. Those costs, of course, don't include any separate equity share re-reviews, state application or licensing costs, building permits, fire permits, health permits, or any other permit or license that may be required to lawfully operate within the city.
Thank you, Jason. Kyle S. would like to know, will DCR accept official IRS tax transcripts in lieu of a copy of a filed tax return?
An official transcript, including all schedules and supporting documents, may be submitted as evidence.
Thank you. Kyle S. and Kevin B. would like to know how many applicants have applied in the 2022 verification window to date.
So we stopped accepting new submissions on July 25th at 4 p.m. and we had received 1,275 eligibility verification submissions by the deadline. Based on our first set of review, there's a number of individuals that the number of individuals verified will be less than 1,275 because that number includes duplicate submissions, test submissions, and some submissions that had no documentation or other evidence to prove eligibility.
Thank you. Demetrius C. asks, can an SEIA apply for a cannabis license now?
A verified social equity individual applicant may apply for certain licenses right now, which include delivery, testing, distribution, and non-volatile manufacturing.
Thanks. Barry R. What steps do I need to take to be legal as a storefront or distributor?
So, first, we have resources available on our website. The second thing is you would have to go through the application submission process. At this time, we're not accepting retail storefront applications. However, people can submit pre-application review records and temporary approval applications for the distributor license type.
Thank you. Raquel L. Is Altadena considered one of the disproportionately impacted areas?
No, Altadena is outside of the city of Los Angeles, so it's not considered a disproportionately impacted area based on the city's study. Folks have the opportunity to collect the data and information necessary and have it analyzed based on their own unique geographies, so long as that analysis complies with the city's study. And then once the data is collected and it's analyzed, it can be submitted for DCR for possible inclusion as a disproportionately impacted area. But to date, Altadena is not a DIA.
Robert B. would like to know if there's any hope for local cannabis tax reduction. Our legal businesses are hurting by both illegal businesses and legal businesses operating in a more friendly jurisdiction.
So our local taxes are either set and approved by the city council and mayor at the levels adopted by the voters. So for adult use retail sales, the tax rate is capped at 10%. The mayor and council have the discretion to temporarily reduce it from that 10% level. Otherwise, the tax rates have to be set by the voters.
Thank you. Robert B. would like to know, does DCR plan to limit the amount of delivery licenses issued? I'm concerned that our local market is becoming oversaturated.
Not at this time. The delivery license type is not subject to a finding of undue concentration. So DCR may consider all eligible applications and issue licenses to applicants that meet the city's requirements.
Okay, Megan C. Are licenses within Los Angeles able to be transferred? What would, would that cause complications with one's state license?
So it depends on what you mean by transfers. So somebody can submit an ownership or equity transfer where persons are, either buying or selling their equity within the applicant or the licensee. Provided that the legal entity is not changing, typically that has less complications when you start requesting those changes to be applied to corresponding state licenses. However, for entity substitution, which is when one entity provides its opportunity to pursue a commercial cannabis license to another entity, the new entity has to submit a new application, both at the local and state level. Therefore, if it's an entity substitution and it's a general application, it's not considered a social equity application, the state no longer issues provisional licenses, and you would not be eligible to get a provisional license for the new entity. Therefore, you would not be able to operate until you receive an annual state license, and you're not eligible to even have a complete annual state application until you've been issued a city annual license, and the appeal period for your license has run its course, both from the licensing standpoint as well as the environmental analysis standpoint.
Thank you. We have several individuals asking about this social equity individual applicant request. That's Mikia G, Wadu M, and Ken K. They want to know if I am verified as a social equity applicant, will I be notified by email or should I check my Excel account daily for confirmation? How soon will I know?
So only individuals that requested to be verified under the expanded eligibility verification request process will be notified. We will be sending out emails at the conclusion of processing, but folks may see their user account updated earlier than we complete processing. It really just depends on where you are in the queue. User accounts will be updated on a rolling basis. So as analysts make determinations, they will be updating those user accounts, but we won't publish the list until we've completed processing all of the requests.
Okay, thank you. Kelly R, what licenses are available for new social equity applicants?
So verified social equity individual applicants can apply for testing, some cultivation license types, delivery, non-volatile manufacturing license types, and distribution licenses.
Thank you. Kelly R would also like to know, can an applicant obtain more than one license?
Yes, as long as you meet the individual requirements for each license type. The city does have caps on the number of licenses one person can own. However, we do allow for folks to have more than one license.
Thank you. Ken K would like to know, provided there are no delays, what is the quickest possible time a social equity individual applicant can obtain a license once accepted? And are there different timetables for different licenses, such as testing, cultivating, storefront, or transportation?
I mean, generally it takes at least 3 to 6 months to obtain a temporary license. If you're pursuing an annual license, it will probably take at least 6 months to a year, depending on how quickly you can complete all of the individual requirements. One of the new requirements is the need for a health permit. And of course, you can't operate until you have a local license and a state license. There's not at the local level, there's not really different timetables for different activity types. The application process is the same for all license types. Really, it just comes down to the differences there would be for individual license types at the annual license process.
Thank you. Nick S. If awarded a retail storefront license, will we be able to have a retail license for 3 different locations?
So one license is valid for one location. Assuming this is related to the lottery, if somebody is selected to participate in the phase 3 retail round 2 process, they get to submit an application for one location.
Thank you, Jason. Maurice C. would like to know, why do relocation approvals from DCR request a lease and premise diagram from applicants within 30 days when zoning verification sometimes takes several months?
So when somebody seeks a business premises relocation, they provide DCR with the proposed business address, and then we verify it for eligibility and compliance with the section of the code, similar to what we do for the pre-application review. Once we complete that process, the record is deemed eligible for further processing, and then they have 30 days to submit their business premises relocation documents, as well as pay the corresponding business premises relocation fees for each of the licenses that are being relocated. The default is 30 days to submit necessary documents, information, and forms, and to pay invoices. And that process is no different. You know, if you're getting peace of mind for a particular location, and it's something that you could apply as a general applicant or a social equity applicant for now, you know, if you want to have additional time to try to negotiate a lease, you should submit a pre-application review record so that you can then go ahead and have up to 1 year to submit your corresponding temporary approval application.
Thank you. Sean S. would like to know, if I did not file taxes and my 4506T results are not in before 7/25, can I use my EBT as proof of low income? I used this to qualify for round 1 and it was approved. Is it still okay?
Well, the answer is no.
Thank you. Sean S. would also like to know, how are companies getting lounge licenses? Is that a general public license, or can only social equity verified people apply for this?
DCR hasn't even begun accepting consumption lounge applications. Therefore, the city has not issued any licenses for a commercial cannabis business to operate a consumption lounge.
Thanks. Excuse me, Gina M. When will all of the city of LA be open to licensing for cannabis? Again, it's also regarding cannabis lounges. How do we obtain those licenses?
You know, currently the land use ordinance does not identify where consumption lounges would be able to locate. and the city council has to make some policy choices as it relates to what zones those types of businesses would be allowed to be licensed in. So right now, DCR1 doesn't have a way to determine whether or not a pre-application would even be compliant, because we don't know what council's policy is on that matter. So we haven't even opened up the application process. So at this time, you cannot obtain a consumption lounge license.
Thank you, Jason. Chris P. would like to know, the Form LIC 4006 form revised on April 11, 2022 states in the instructions that notarized signatures are required, but the form on the website does not have a page for notarization. How should we complete this form?
If a published form no longer has a space for notarization, then it's not required on that form.
Thank you. Ramiar K, what is the best way to request a cultivation PCN, as it's very hard to find large and fit property for cultivation in my community plan?
So at this time, DCR is not accepting any form of PCN request, but I anticipate the process will open up towards the end of this year.
Thank you. Levon E, are there going to be additional licenses added from round 1 to round 2?
So as part of the round 2 lottery, DCR has the authority to select a sufficient number of social equity individual applicants to reach undue concentration citywide. Once undue concentration is reached, DCR may only accept and process an application if the city council makes the necessary PCN findings. If for some reason in the future a community plan area falls below an undue concentration level, DCR would have the authority to administer a new lottery process for whatever number of licenses would be available.
Thank you. Levon E, are there going to be additional license? Oh, sorry. Let me skip to the next question. Lost my place there. Pablo C would like to know, how do I get help picking on the right community for a cannabis business, and advice on financial resources?
So I'm just going to caveat that question with DCR does not provide business advice. Social equity individual applicants have access to the resources made available through the social equity program, and they're routinely doing events, and there's resources, a learning management system, there's vendors who provide different assistance and information about what it takes to start a cannabis related business. I would refer folks to our website and to look at the social equity program and the resources listed under the social equity program header.
Thank you. Maria C, how long does it take to obtain a CUP?
So a CUP, or conditional use permit, is not terminology used by DCR. That's not part of our process. As it relates to the commercial cannabis licensure process, it takes a minimum of 3 to 6 months to meet the requirements to receive a temporary license.
Thank you. Maria C, if moving a license to a different location, how long do you have to get operational in the new location? Can the license stay dormant until the new location is complete?
So you're not going to be able to receive a license at the new location until you meet all of the requirements for licensure, which includes passing at a minimum an initial inspection. There's not a set period of time in the current code whereby a applicant has to transition from local compliance underway, which is a status issued when their application is deemed filed, to actually having a license issued. We know that folks have to go through build outs, they have to get necessary permits from the fire department, the building department, public health, the state of California, before they can begin to operate. And each of those entities has their own process, and it can take time to navigate through those processes. However, if you do relocate a license, your previously issued license expires the earlier of 150 days from the date the business premises relocation fees were paid, or when the license expires, whichever happens first.
Thank you. Robert B. has two questions regarding starting in the industry. His first question is, how do I apply in this industry, and how do I know that I qualify?
So I would refer him to our website, which has got information about our licensing process, the application process, the workflows, the forms. For the do I qualify, we wouldn't be able to answer that question. If you had applied to become a verified social equity individual applicant and you submitted information to the department by the deadline, we'd have an opportunity to review that. If you are not a social equity individual applicant, there are license types that anyone has the opportunity to apply for, and that information can all be found on our website.
Robert's second question is, how much does it cost to have all the legal paperwork to get a license?
It's going to come down to how many license types you're pursuing and how many times it takes you to navigate through the process. But you should expect to pay at least $20,000 in application and inspection fees before you're eligible to receive an annual license. And depending on the number of activities, how long it takes to review, how many re-reviews there are, the state licensing process, and any local permits you have to get, that cost could be significantly higher.
Thank you, John. C would like to know, are we expected to have a business location to store products with the delivery license, or will storefronts have to provide us with the space we need to store our products and set up a delivery service?
So each license needs to have its own distinct business premises. So if you are pursuing a non-storefront delivery license, you will have to have a distinct business premises for your operation. You can set up a business model whereby you never have cannabis on site. You could pursue a distribution license as well as a non-storefront delivery license. And you could basically have any cannabis that you would be purchasing kind of move through the warehouse that, you are kind of a sub-occupant of, and basically do B2B transactions using the distribution license, and then have your delivery drivers go to your warehouse and then pick up cannabis, or pick up cannabis directly from another licensee's warehouse, whereby you're purchasing the commercial cannabis for sale to consumers. So every licensee has to have their own distinct business premises. People can sublet from other licensees, or have a small space for their license. And then of course, each licensee just has to have their own distinct business premises that complies with local and state law.
Thank you. John C would like to know if storefront locations also have a delivery license.
Yes. So the full retail storefront license allows people to conduct on-site and off-site sales. And the off-site sales, of course, are considered delivery.
Thanks. Danny E would like to know, where can we post up and advertise?
So there's restrictions on advertising in the municipal code. Generally, businesses are not allowed to place off-site signs, posters, etc., within a certain number of feet of schools, public parks and other types of sensitive uses, I would just refer you to the Los Angeles Municipal Code for the city's advertising prohibitions. And then you can also look at the state licensing, the Department of Cannabis Controls website for information as it relates to the state's advertising requirements and limitations.
Thank you. Danny E. would like to know, for a delivery type business, are there routes that drivers must use?
There aren't special routes drivers are required to use, but they do have to follow applicable transportation laws.
Jennifer D. would like to know, what are the steps to legally distribute?
Distribution licenses are required for distribution of cannabis products between businesses. A delivery license would be required for selling cannabis to consumers. Licensing information can be found on the department's website. It's under our licensing section. You'll see application forms, the workflows, et cetera. And then you can look to see what type of license you would need to pursue in terms of what activity you want to kind of engage in and whether or not you're doing business to business distribution or you're looking to do business to consumer distribution, which is delivery.
Lisa S. would like to know, will those who qualify for the lottery need to apply, or will all those who qualify be automatically entered into the lottery?
Folks that are verified under the expanded process will have to register to participate in the lottery, and further instructions about the registration process will be provided at a later date.
Thank you. Liara D. would like to know, are there any changes in the foreseeable future for METRC?
Metric is the state's track and trace software solution, and we DCR have no authority over it, nor do we have access to the data. So I'm not sure whether or not they have any planned changes to their software solution or the types of information that they're gathering. I would refer you to the state on that one.
Okay, Lisa S. has a question. Will we be able to know ahead of time in which CPAs we may get leases? Wondering if the current CPA undue concentration map will be a guide for us. Will things change with the map, or where can we locate it?
So the CPAs and undue concentration do change. And by the time we administer the lottery, we may or may not know which community plan areas are considered unduly concentrated. So if you're looking for a compliant location, it may be in your best interest not to secure a lease until you know whether or not you are even selected to submit a retail storefront location, let alone whether or not the CPA your proposed business premises would be located in is unduly concentrated or not unduly concentrated. Currently, when DCR issues a retail storefront license or a cultivation license, it counts toward the cap for the number of licenses we can issue without a PCN finding in that community plan area. Since we have hundreds of applications still pending that have not received licenses, those numbers do change week to week. And as we inch closer to undue concentration, to the extent we still have pending applications, it could be a matter of time where that CPA reaches undue concentration, and it may happen before you even have an opportunity to submit an actual application. So I would wait to get through the pre-application review process, which does not require you to have an executed lease or any other form of property or site control before you actually sign a lease.
Thank you. Mike C wants to know, how can I obtain a cannabis nursery license in Los Angeles County?
So I can't speak for the entire county because we only handle licensing for the city of Los Angeles. But if you are a verified social equity individual applicant, you would be eligible to apply for the cultivation nursery license type, and information about our application process and the forms required are available on DCR's website.
Thank you, Jason. Charles P would like to know, how can the community chime in, for example, public hearings on license approvals?
So the public hearing process for retail storefront businesses is a component of the annual application process, and DCR cannot conduct a public hearing, let alone make a recommendation to the Cannabis Regulation Commission until a annual application has been deemed complete, and then DCR meets all of the different inspection and noticing requirements to forward a recommendation to the CRC. As part of that process, we will be doing virtual community meetings where we get input from members of the public, and then that will be part of the report transmitted to the Cannabis Regulation Commission. And then, of course, members of the public will have an opportunity to address the Cannabis Regulation Commission when they take up annual licenses for different activity types.
Thank you, Jason. Luis R would like to know, what is the timeline to process the new social equity verification application requests? Will this information be made to the public?
So DCR has at least 90 days to process the eligibility verification request that's set by code. And then, of course, if we need additional time, we have the ability to take additional time. Until we finish processing, we're not going to open up the registration process for the phase 3 retail round 2 lottery. And then, of course, we will not be doing daily updates as we process these eligibility verification requests. We'll most likely just publish a list of individuals that were verified as part of this process after we finish processing all of the requests submitted.
Luis R wants to know, what is the timeline to process the new social equity verification applications? Did I ask that? I'm sorry. So let me skip to Charles L. Do you have to shut down operations in order to relocate a delivery service? I have orders daily and I'm concerned about my business.
So if somebody is looking to relocate, a license that has been issued expires the earlier of when the license expires, or 150 days from the date the individual pays their business premises relocation fee. And then, of course, once we say that they're eligible to pay it, they have 30 days. So if you take the full amount of time to pay the fee, and then you take the full 150 days, you basically have 180 days or 6 months to do what you need to do to begin operating at the new location before it impacts your business operations. Again, as part of the relocation process, if you meet the eligibility requirements to get temporary approval at the new location, as part of the issuance of that temporary approval, you would have to cancel your previously issued temporary approval, provided it hadn't already expired. So it's really going to be up to you to make the business decisions necessary to kind of balance the transition from your existing location to a new location, and then make sure that you're getting everything into your analyst so they can process your application and get you moving towards temporary approval at the new location.
Thank you. Nita has questions regarding delivery. To track the car you're using for delivery, is there a certain GPS that it has to be used, or can I go through any GPS company for purchase?
I'm going to put a pin in that for just a second because I did want to go back to Charles's last question. If you're talking about the delivery license, because there is not a cap on the number of licenses DCR can issue, and you have concerns about not being able to meet the requirements to get temporary approval at the new location within 6 months, you could always just keep your existing delivery license and then continue to timely renew it until you have met the requirements for temporary approval at your new location. If you wanted to do that, you would basically submit a new pre-application review record at your new proposed location. And then if it's found eligible for further processing, you'd have up to a year to submit a temporary approval application and then navigate through the temporary approval process once you had submitted that application. But you would basically have one application for your existing delivery license. And to the extent that you have site control and you can renew it and meet the requirements to operate at that location, you can continue to operate there, while in parallel, you start a new application for a new license at your new proposed business. That's just another option you have. And then switching back to the other question, which I believe is about GPS requirements and whether or not people are required to use a certain company. You are not required to use a specific company. I do recommend you look at DCR's rules and regulations. There are certain requirements for what type of global positioning system or GPS device you use. Phones won't cut it for the individual device, which is part of our rules and regs. But other systems and other companies, we're not going to tell you which one you have to pick or choose.
Thank you, Jason. Charnel J. Is it worth it to submit a partial application to get the process started?
It's probably not a good idea. The city has created a process where folks can submit a pre-application review record and find out whether or not the proposed location complies with our land use provisions as well as the eligibility criteria for the location. If the location is deemed eligible for further processing, you have up to a year to submit an application to DCR. The pre-application review process just requires you to identify a proposed location and then submit a landowner attestation form for that location. You are not required to have an active lease. You are not required to have a property deed or any sort of formal site control. And then, of course, when you are ready to submit your temporary approval application, the city has recently adopted processing timelines, and folks need to meet those processing timelines. So if you're not able to get to a complete application within 30 days of submitting your application, you may be assessed additional fees and told that you have to submit the missing documentation, and you'll be provided an additional 30 days. And if you don't submit anything or you don't pay those fees, the application record would be deemed abandoned, and you would have to start over.
Thank you. Maurice C. wants to know, after abandoning a license application, how quickly can a social equity applicant begin the refiling process?
It depends on kind of where you want to start the clock. Once DCR has abandoned a temporary approval application and updated that record status to abandoned -refile, the functionality to start a new pre-application review record in the DCR licensing portal is there. When you click on it and you start the new pre-application review process, it may take up to 60 days for DCR to review that refiling request to determine whether or not it complies with the Los Angeles Municipal Code. Depending on the license type will depend on who's able to initiate the refiling. Depending on the activities you're pursuing, whether or not they're subject to findings of undue concentration, is your proposed new business premises in the same community plan area? Those are all things that have to be reviewed by DCR before we issue you an invoice to actually pay for the pre-application review fees. And then of course you need to pay for the pre-application review invoice before we can make a determination about whether or not your proposed location meets the land use and eligibility requirements in the code. And then of course from there, if it is deemed eligible for further processing, you'd have the ability to submit a new temporary approval application.
Thank you, Jason. Maurice C. also wants to know, how could a license expand its premises beyond the current 2,500 square foot limitation all at once? Could they submit multiple business premises modifications?
No, we handle it through a relocation request. The difference between a business premises expansion and the relocation is whether or not DCR is required to do a new land use review for eligibility and compliance. And, it's done that way so that folks don't, secure a location and design a business premises right outside of the sensitive use buffer zone and then immediately try to expand into that sensitive use buffer zone. And then it would ultimately make it DCR unable to potentially issue an annual license or temporary approval license at that location. So if you do want to expand beyond 2,500 square feet, you could submit a business premises relocation request and add the additional units or congruent properties that you would be taking over to expand your business so that we can do the land use review to make sure that the entire business premises complies with the code. And then once that happens, we'll be able to set up the inspection and get the necessary paperwork to allow you to operate in that expanded area.
Thank you. Alfred T. would like to know, do phase 3, round 1 social equity individual applicants lose their status if they don't qualify under the new criteria?
So this is a game of semantics. As somebody who was verified under the original criteria in 2019 still keeps their social equity individual applicant status for application records that are currently before the city of LA. So if they participated in phase 3 round 1 and they have an active phase 3 round 1 application or a license, the 2019 verification is good for that application record. If they have a pending non-storefront delivery application, the original verification is good for that application record. But as soon as we finish processing everybody under the expanded criteria and we start the registration process for the lottery, only folks that meet the expanded eligibility criteria are going to be able to, 1, register for the lottery, and then 2, of course, submit a retail storefront application if they are selected via the lottery. And there will come a point in time where folks have to be verified under the expanded criteria for all new applications.
Thank you. Joe R. would like to know, when is the PCN process opening and how many days will it open?
The process will open towards the end of this year. Likely it will happen shortly after we've conducted the lottery, so that if additional community plan areas reach undue concentration, folks would have an opportunity to submit a public convenience or necessity request in those unduly concentrated community plan areas. As it relates to how many days it will be open, I anticipate that the filing period will probably be open for about 2 weeks, like it was for the pilot program. And then That will give us the opportunity to collect all of the PCN requests, issue all of the invoices, find out who paid the applicable fees, submitted the necessary forms so that we could do our review. And then of course, for folks that have proposed a location that could be eligible for further processing, they would then have the opportunity to pay the PCN fee, and then DCR would package that request and transmit it to the city council for their consideration. More information about PCN will be released later this year as we get closer to administering a new request filing period.
Thanks, Cami A. How significant is the LA illicit market, and how does your office intend to curb it?
The significance will vary from person to person, depending on what side of the equation they're on. DCR has no authority to do anything against unlicensed commercial cannabis businesses. We are only focused on the licensed and regulated marketplace. We provide information to the police department, water and power, building and safety, the city attorney's office, the mayor's office, and other city agencies to verify whether or not a license has been issued to a particular entity at a particular location. If no license has been issued, then it's considered unlicensed commercial cannabis activity, and then it's up to those agencies to address that unlicensed activity. The city has a progressive enforcement strategy for unlicensed businesses, and really it kind of depends on the geography you live in, and then as well as how many licensed locations are within that geography. But we directly don't have any control about how to deal with unlicensed or non-compliant businesses that aren't licensed by all of the necessary agencies.
Thanks, Jason. Kimber W. wants to know, has DCR engaged a CEQA consultant? If so, are CEQA reviews being submitted to the consultant, or is DCR still processing them? Has the CEQA review process begun, and have any neighborhoods reached critical mass in their submissions yet? There's a lot.
So DCR was never going to do the project level environmental review. We always envisioned contracting with a consultant. We worked with the Department of City Planning, and we're using their bench of environmental consultants to process the final project descriptions submitted by licensees. We began accepting the final project descriptions, which is the LIC 4013 form, on June 1st. Those forms are batched based on community plan area, and then they'll be submitted for bid with that consultant bench. To date, none of the community plan areas have received a sufficient number of final project descriptions to trigger a bid from that bench of consultants to do the work. So we continue to collect the forms, review the forms for completeness, and then track where those forms are, so that once we've received a sufficient number, we can basically bid out a package of projects to be reviewed and looked at in parallel with one another. And then of course the consultant will process them on a rolling basis. And as the analysis comes back to the department, we'll work with the office of the city attorney to review the information, and then we'll address any questions we have with the consultant. Once the environmental review is complete, then we'll be eligible to start the annual application process for that particular licensee.
Thanks. JSC would like to know, will storefront locations be required by law to share space for products to be stored with a Type 9 license holder?
Can you repeat that one more time?
Sure. Will storefront locations be required by law to share space for products to be stored with a Type 9 license?
Okay, so the question itself isn't 100% clear to me. A licensed storefront location has a retail license that allows for them to do on-site sales as well as off-site sales, which are considered delivery. A licensed storefront can keep cannabis products in their inventory at that location to be used for delivery to consumers. Um, as it relates to two different licensees, two licensees have the ability to share a location, provided that the location wouldn't be precluded because of distancing restrictions. But a storefront licensee and a delivery licensee could be located on the same parcel and operate on that parcel, provided they each have their own distinct business premises. Our retail storefronts are not required to sublet or provide space to any of our delivery licensees. If there's any private business arrangements as it relates to social equity agreements or the implementation of social equity agreements, the space and who would benefit from utilizing space in co-locating would be negotiated by the two licensees, or the licensee who has to meet the social equity agreement requirement, and the applicant who would be their beneficiary.
Thank you, Jason. Tyrone F. What is the time frame for DCR reconciliation of fees once information is received from the Office of Finance?
So we receive an LA tax report on a weekly basis, and then DCR personnel go through the report, and then they look for the corresponding payments in our system. When a payment is considered paid will differ based on the payment type and how Office of Finance got the information. So if somebody mails in a payment, it's not processed the same day that it's delivered to City Hall. Normally it goes through a mail room, then it gets routed to the Office of Finance, then it gets routed to the Cannabis Support Unit, and then the Cannabis Support Unit processes those mail payments on a rolling basis outside of normal business hours. So normally before the start of a shift, the end of the shift, or when their office is closed to the public. So that takes time. And then of course, until the associate that processes the payment closes their cash drawer, which normally happens the next business day as long as their cash drawer reconciles, then it takes about 24 hours to show up on the LA tax report. So I would say, depending on how you pay, normally it will take at least 1 to 2 weeks for the information to get transmitted back to DCR and get applied to the corresponding record. To kind of address that, we've been working with the Office of Finance to streamline all of the different fund classes and payment codes that have been used since 2018. Currently there's over 24 fund class types based on adult use and medical use and activities. And there's over 30 actual different payment codes tied to individual cannabis activities and phases. So things like cultivation, where you have payment codes from phase 1 through phase 4, you've got 12 different payment codes based on the size of the footprint. What we're doing now is we're going to consolidate all of them into the higher level license types. So if you're cultivation, there's a fixed fee for cultivation applications and licenses. And we're no longer going to differentiate between specialty indoor, small indoor, or medium indoor for the payment purposes or LA tax purposes, because all of that's the same. We'll only differentiate on the actual commercial cannabis application and license based on the size you're authorized for. And then that, of course, will reduce the back and forth with finance to make sure that the codes are correct and they're copied over from the appropriate phases. And it's going to allow us to implement an e-payment solution through the DCR licensing portal, similar to what Office of Finance has, later this year. So we're starting, we've already started the fee consolidation process. Our vendor Excella is working on updating scripts to point to the consolidated fee codes. Finance is working on a solution to migrate existing taxpayers over to the new structure as part of the renewal cycle. And then on a go forward basis, hopefully by the beginning of September, DCR is going to begin transitioning new applicants to the new payment structure. Existing licensees who renew will get transitioned as part of the renewal process. And then when those three things happen, we'll be able to implement the e-payment solution through the DCR licensing portal. So if you pay by e-check or credit card through the portal, we would immediately know whether or not you paid. There'll still be delays for mailed in payments and folks that have to request an appointment, but there will be a faster solution for certain licensees who have access to checking accounts or credit cards.
Okay, I think we have one more question from Tyrone F. Has DCR miscategorized delivery as transportation for the purposes of city taxes? If so, how will DCR mitigate this for delivery licenses?
So DCR has no authority over taxation or the collection of taxes. If a delivery business was classified as a distribution or distribution transport only business, the change in tax fund class needs to be resolved with the Office of Finance. You know, the activity type that's listed on the license businesses receive from us indicates what activity that they're allowed to engage in. And I believe we've reached our time. Gidget, are we doing any more questions or are we going to stop for now?
Let's take a couple more questions if you're able to, Jason.
Sure.
Okay. Gregor wants to know, can you have a green cross posted outside of your retail store?
Graphics and images have to comply with the advertising requirements under LAMC 106.06. So without actually seeing a plan or knowing what it's going to look like, I couldn't tell you whether or not it would comply.
Thank you. What is the definition of a city property regarding non-storefront delivery? Can a vehicle pull in front of a delivery warehouse?
I don't quite follow the question. So each licensee needs to have their own distinct business premises, and a delivery licensee should have an area where the vehicles that are used to deliver cannabis to consumers would be parked. And, you know, that's either going to be at their delivery office or the business premises associated with the delivery, or, you know, they may have a shared parking lot with a distributor who's operating a warehouse. You know, if you've got a business premises that has a shared parking lot and you're storing your vehicles in the parking lot, and then you pick up directly from the distributor and then you transport it to the end consumer using the delivery vehicle, it could comply. But without having more detail, I can't provide any other guidance.
Thank you, Jason. Christina C. would like to know, are you allowed to have a kiosk for delivery?
Again, without knowing the full context of the question, it's hard to say. If you were a licensed delivery company, you couldn't park a van on a street and then have an iPad and then have people basically come up to your van like an ice cream truck and then purchase cannabis products directly there. There's certain requirements for how orders are taken and how much cannabis can be in a vehicle to be used to make deliveries to folks, and there's a dollar limitations. So there are certain loopholes that people have exploited because the state code allows for it. But generally, you would not be able to operate a full day by using some of these loopholes.
Thank you. I believe this question is also from Christina C. Can we upgrade our cultivation before we purchase a larger warehouse?
You could apply to change your footprint from a smaller size to a larger size before you purchase the larger warehouse. However, as part of the change from, for instance, specialty indoor to medium indoor, you would be required to go through you will go through another initial inspection for the larger size, and the analyst will have to see kind of the built environment that supports the increased canopy and the activity and make sure it complies with our rules and regs and our code before you get a new temporary approval license for the larger size. So at that point, you would have had to have secured it, but you could initiate the process before you actually get site control of the location.
Great. Ariella, I'm sorry. Did you have an additional?
Yeah, I was just going to say that kind of goes back to one of the earlier questions where, folks were talking about the relocation. And, if you're going from a specialty indoor to a medium indoor, that's not going to be done through a business premises diagram change. It's going to exceed the 2,500 square feet. So we'd have to process it as a relocation. So you'd pay the 542 fee for DCR to determine whether or not the proposed location complies and is eligible. And then if we do determine it's eligible, you've got 30 days to pay your business premises relocation fees, and then you'll have to start submitting your temporary approval application documents for the expanded area.
Thanks, Jason. Ariella J wants to know, when will the legal entity Excella record process open up?
So the legal entity record is already in the DCR licensing portal in the production environment. Last month, when we took the portal down over the weekend, we were pushing those updates to the portal, and folks can create a legal entity record and begin uploading their entity related documents to the legal entity record. Additionally, for folks that are looking to do the equity share review outside of the temporary approval process, if you create your legal entity record as part of the submission process, it'll ask you if you're requesting equity share review, and if you are, it'll give you the opportunity to upload your equity share review documents, and then DCR will invoice you for the corresponding equity share review fees, but then you could get verified as an entity before you submit your temporary approval application. And that's one of those changes that is being implemented on a go forward basis so that folks can get the entity verified before they actually get into the temporary approval process. And I'm going to have to run to another meeting, so I apologize. I'm going to have to stop here.
Thank you, Jason.
You're very welcome. Thanks everybody for attending today. I believe the next Q&A session is going to be on Thursday, September 15th. I believe
That's right.
so. Okay,
That's
thank you.
Mhm.
So I know our comms team will send out the invitation and the way folks can start submitting questions in advance. Gidget, thank you so much. Olivia, thank you. And thank you everybody who attended. Bye.